Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed watching my New Zealand series that's been airing on this channel for the past few weeks. Last week I released an episode from Queenstown, and sadly that was the last episode of on-location shooting from New Zealand. After Queenstown we boarded the plane and headed home, and it's actually kinda hard to believe it's been 10 months since we returned. But I wanted to make one more episode which talks more about the practical aspects of traveling to New Zealand. Things like where to go, when to go, what to take into account, what to take with you, how to prepare for the trip, what kind of resources I used and found useful, how much does it cost. All this practical advice that can help you prepare your trip to New Zealand and hopefully save you some time. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the future of this channel, what to expect going forward, and I actually also have a few unreleased images from New Zealand that never made it to any of the videos. So I'm going to show them in the end. Stick around if you're interested. There is a lot of ground to cover and I don't want this video to be super long, so let's roll that intro one last time and let's get started. Alright, first things first. As you might know, New Zealand is actually two big islands, the North Island and the South Island. And probably one of the first questions you're going to encounter is, which islands do I go to? Do I try to cover them both, or do I choose just one? My answer to that is, if that's your first trip and you have 2 weeks or even 3 weeks, just stick with one island. I spent 2 weeks on the South Island and that was not enough to see everything it has to offer. So I cannot imagine doing both of them in that time frame. Technically, you can do this, but it's going to be a very rushed trip, you're going to be very stressed, and you won't see a whole lot. Next question is when to go. The summertime in New Zealand is the most popular season. That's December to February, that's when it's the warmest there. For photographers though, I do recommend going either in spring or in autumn, just because you get more variety of conditions. In spring you still have snow high up in the mountains. In autumn you get all the beautiful autumn colors, and it's also cheaper because there are less tourists in that time. The next item I'm going to mention has to deal with the customs as you arrive. You are handed out a very detailed declaration form where you have to declare everything you bring into the country, including things like hiking shoes or hiking poles. The reason for that is that they don't want any kind of foreign soil entering the country, because it may contain bacteria and stuff like that. And if they find something you haven't declared, even if that's your own hiking shoes, for example, you're gonna be in a bit of a trouble. Also, make sure your shoes are clean, because you're gonna be handed out a fine if there's dirt on them. You have to declare all the food you bring in, so I suggest not having anything that's raw, like fruit or vegetables. What you do need to bring into the country are two things, which are very important in my opinion. Number one is repellent. The entire west coast of New Zealand, places like Hokitika, Milford Sound, the glaciers area, they have a ton of sandflies. They're gonna bite you. The bites itch for days. They're very unpleasant. So just bring some repellent. It's gonna help you out a lot. The second thing you need to bring are these little guys, because New Zealand does not have power sockets that are compatible with European or US power plugs. So you don't want to end up in a situation where you arrive into the country and discover that you cannot charge any of your gear, your phone, your laptop, your cameras. Grab those on eBay or Amazon, they're super cheap. Throw them to the back, saves you a whole lot of trouble. Next up is how to best explore the country. In my opinion, the one true way to do it is by having your own rental car or a camper van. New Zealand has a lot of beautiful roads that are simply enjoyable to drive. If you have your own car, you can stop and take photos of the landscapes, you can choose your own way, you're not dependent on the public transportation or the schedule. It just gives you so much more freedom and flexibility, which is super important, especially if you're a photographer. Now, with that come two things that I need to mention here. Number one is driving in New Zealand is on the left side of the road. So if you have little or no experience with that kind of driving, give yourself a bit of time to get used to it. Overall, I don't suggest planning a whole lot of driving for your first day, because you're going to be arriving tired and exhausted and sleep deprived, and you don't want to be driving in those conditions. Give yourself some time to rest and then you're good to go. The second thing is that New Zealand requires you to have a driver's license that is issued in English. If you don't have one, you have to translate it. New Zealand Transportation Agency has a website, which I'm going to link down below, with a list of all the approved translators that you can use. And the process is very simple. You email them, attach a scan of your license and ask them to translate it. You pay a fee, which is not that bad, maybe 26 euros or something I paid. And then a few days later, you get your license back translated with a seal, with a signature, with everything you need. Just print it out and present it at the rental counter. And they do ask for it, so it's not just a formality. So I suggest doing it beforehand and then put it in your documents that you bring with you. For photography, I don't actually have a whole lot of special tips. New Zealand is pretty safe for photographers. I went everywhere with my cameras and my gear and had it on display at all times. Never felt threatened or uneasy or intimidated. What I would mention is the weather. It's very unpredictable in New Zealand. At one point we had like 3 or 4 days just complete non-stop rain, then it's sun again, then it's rain again. The point here is be prepared to shoot to the conditions. If you're planning to have an epic sunset or an epic sunrise each and every day, that's probably not going to happen. So don't let that discourage you, just adjust your approach. There's always something to be shot. Another super useful thing to check is tide schedule, especially if you're doing any sort of coastal or seascape photography, because a lot of places do change in appearance quite a bit depending on the tide cycle. There is a website, which I'm going to link down below, which gives you information about the tide schedule for months in advance, so you can check that out. If you know when you go into which particular place, it should give you an idea what's the best time to actually be at location. And finally, if you're doing any sort of aerial drone photography or videography, you need to know that a lot of places in New Zealand require you have a permission. It's not an easy process to get, and you probably are going to need one because pretty much all the beautiful places are owned by the Department of Conservation, and those are the places where you need to apply for permission. I do have a blog article, which I'm going to link down below, where I describe all the steps in details and the entire process, what you need to do, in which order, how much does it cost, and things like that. So check that out. That's probably it for photography advice. I do have a few more resources that I think might be useful. So first of all, the books. I have 2 of those. I have the Lonely Planet Guide, and I have this one called NZ Frenzy. Use them both. This one, Lonely Planet, it's okay, but it's more about cities, places to eat out, places to stay, like adventure things to do, like more of a touristy stuff. So not a good match for me, but this one is awesome. This one I definitely recommend getting. This deals more with hikes, outdoor areas, a bit of photography, places to explore, a lot of hidden places, a lot of secret places. If you're only gonna get one, just pick this one up. It's definitely worth it. I'm gonna link them both below. Those are gonna be my Amazon affiliate links. If you check them out and decide to buy them, I get a small commission at absolutely no cost for you, and it's gonna help me maintain this channel, so big thank you if you do that. For online resources, there is a blog that I recommend that is called inafarawayland.com. It's geared more towards photographers. It has articles about sunrise places, sunset places, like most beautiful places to photograph. So check that out. I also have my own blog if you're interested, where I talk about all the locations I visited in my videos. And I also have a full 2-week itinerary that I myself planned and used, and I think it's a good itinerary if you want to check that out. Also linked down in the description. So now let's talk numbers. How much does it cost to go to New Zealand? Well, New Zealand is pretty expensive to travel, so I'm not gonna lie to you, we paid a whole lot of money. What I'm gonna do is break down all the costs that we had, so you can kind of have an idea and an example of what to expect. So starting with airplane tickets, probably one of the most expensive things in this list. We paid 1,400 euros per ticket, which is a crazy amount of money, probably the most I ever paid for a plane ticket. But from Europe to New Zealand, I never saw any kind of discount fares or air fares. If you do get it, you're super lucky, grab it. For hotels, wasn't too bad. We paid about 1,200 euros for the entire stay, so that's about 9 euros per night. You can probably go a bit cheaper by having a camper van, but my research has shown that actually renting one is significantly more expensive, and then you also have to pay for camping and all the other stuff. Probably won't save you a whole lot of money, but definitely worth considering. Food is another big one. We try to be super cheap on this one. We cooked our own meals. We never or rarely ate out, only maybe a cafe and restaurant here and there. With this approach, we still paid about 800 euros. Rental car was 600 euros for us. You can probably pay a little bit less because we paid extra for turning it in a different location. Gas was 400 euros for the entire 2-week trip. Then there were souvenirs, memorabilia, things like this t-shirt, hoodies, wine in the winery, this little sheep we bought in Wanaka, which is kind of cute. All the things like that, so we paid about 300 euros for all of those. Then miscellaneous items, another 100 euros, things like SD cards, translating the driver's license, buying the adapters, buying the repellent, things like that. If you want to do any sort of excursions or tours, Milford Sound is actually not that bad. We paid 77 euros for the both of us, plus the drinks and food on the boat itself. But where it does get expensive is the heli hike. If you want to go to the glacier, Fox Glacier or Franz Josef Glacier with a helicopter, it's pretty expensive. Right now the tickets go for about 290 euros per person. So if you add this all up, you get a pretty frightening number. We paid almost 7,000 euros for 2 people for this trip, which is a whole lot of money. You can actually buy a new camera and a new lens, and maybe even another new lens for that type of money. But you get what you pay for. It was a super fun country to visit. We drove 3,346 kilometers in total. I got back with 1,600 photos and 450 gigabytes of footage, which is almost 11 hours of footage if you think about it. That's why it took me so long to go through it. But it was a very enjoyable experience and I loved doing this series. And I hope you loved watching it as well. Which brings me nicely into the next topic I want to talk about, and that is the future of this channel. No more New Zealand content. That doesn't mean though there isn't content coming up. I have a whole lot of stuff in the pipeline. There won't be a video next week, but in 2 weeks I'm going to be starting with some episodes from France, which I visited last year and this year as well. It's not going to be a whole series, but more like bits and pieces. Interesting places to visit. And then after that, we're going to Tenerife, Canary Islands. I'm actually working on a photographer's guide to Tenerife because it's a beautiful place, not only vacation destination, but has a lot to offer to a landscape photographer. So check that out when it's out. And yeah, and then early next year, I'm working on not 1, but 2 full-size series, like New Zealand scale series. So super excited about that, a lot of content coming up. So if you like what I do, if you like my videos, please subscribe. There is more coming your way and I'm always happy to see you here. And that's probably it for this video. I hope you found something useful in it. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have further questions about New Zealand or anything else, just leave them down below and I'll do my best to try and answer them all. And yeah, I'm gonna see you in the next one. And here are some images that I promised, so enjoy.